Some people that, though, are maybe doing some ranting. Maybe this is a good segue into this. Texas A&M fans, are they... I shouldn't start out like this, but I'm going to. I'm sorry, Texas A&M fans, for saying it like this. Do you think they regret the move? Like, would they ever admit that? They're a prideful people, and I don't mean that in a bad way. They've got a pride in their university and their weird chants and all that they do. I think they like being called a cult, like whatever. I think they're like, yeah, bring it on. Similar to the folks in Clemson, South Carolina. I think they like it. I think they like the hate. They embrace that. Do you think they're regretting the move to the SEC?
I think Texas A&M regrets the move to the SEC more than any defunct Big 12 team. Even Missouri has gone to SEC championship games, and Missouri has been right there in New Year's Six Bowls for the opportunity to play for a college football playoff or a championship. And A&M is now seeing the second that Big Brother Texas moves in and Oklahoma moves in, they're now seeing a complete and utter downfall. One of the worst years you could ask for as a fan of a collegiate team. Now, look, there are those putrid Baylor teams where they were terrible in basketball, baseball, and football. There are putrid Northwestern years where they're bad at everything, or a Purdue year, or pick a random team and you can find years in their program where they've just sucked. The problem for A&M, I think this year has established it maybe more than ever, is leaving the Big 12 just sign themselves up for a heartache. And if you're a fan, I'll get to why. But if you're a fan, the first thing I want to ask you, that extra $20 million a year the university got, how much of that money do you get? How much of that money, the $20 million that you were so excited about, we're going to the SEC, more exposure, more money, more TV time. How much of that has changed your life for the positive? How much of that has made your viewing experience as a fan better? The answer is none. This is from TexAgs, which is the biggest Texas A&M site where people go on their message boards and type a bunch of stuff. And this says, how do you get one win away from winning your first Big Three championship since 1939 and your most successful head coach in program history leaves for your arch rival? That's baseball. Then you start the season unanimous preseason number one, baseball. Break the record for fastest drop-off from number one to unranked, and you're going to miss the postseason in baseball this year. They got swept by Missouri, the worst team maybe of all time in the SEC. Then you start 8-1 in football, first place in the conference, finish the season losing 4 in a row. You're 8-5. Then you don't make it past the second round of the NCAA tournament, one of the best basketball teams you've ever had, and your head coach leaves. Then you've lost all three big games in the Big Three sports to your arch rival in the first season of renewing the rivalry after 13 years of hiatus. All of that in 12 months. Texas A&M fans are as dejected as they've ever been. Missouri has found success. Nebraska has not. Colorado did not. A&M has not to the nth degree. They're the saddest of the schools that left the Big 12. And honestly, TJ, I think we're going to find that some of these teams that left, some of these schools that left, Colorado already proved it, they regret it. They regret it because they just weren't ready to compete. They were too cocky. They believed too much in that $20 million a year is going to change everything, and then it didn't. And now their fans have just been miserable for going on 15 years.
You talk about that 20, how does that impact your life? And the answer would be if they took it and did something with it. The answer would, personally.
Sure, yeah.
Personally, because you say the same thing, right? Let's liken it to Florida State. How much is Florida State going to the Power 2 going to impact my life? Well, personally, none. I'm not going to make any more or less money, or my 401k is not going to grow because Florida State goes, or if they stay, I'm not in any financial trouble or anything like that. But I mean, you could look at an aspect and say, like, if your university or their program had done something with it, then yeah, you could say that it had brought them some more joy, some more pleasure, some more enjoyment on Saturdays or midweek or just whenever they are playing games. But they haven't even the problem. Does the problem stem from the fact that A&M just what is their problem, right? I mean, I'm trying to figure out a way to ask that question.
Yeah.
Is it just leadership? Are they cursed? Is it, what is the problem? It feels like they hire decently. I mean, Jimbo seemed like a good hire at the time. Elko seems like a good hire. They certainly had a great baseball coach that did get poached, I understand, but they've hired okay. Basketball coach seems to be like, what is their problem at A&M?
Yeah, I think that Texas A&M is going to forever live in the shadow of other universities in that state that are either above them objectively. Like UT is far and away above Texas A&M in the category of brand power, in the category of revenue. That's you can't debate it. They're also in a much larger city. Everything's pointing toward UT. Then there are the smaller schools like Baylor and TCU and Texas Tech and even Houston that A&M overlooks and says, oh, well, we don't even have to sniff at them. We're so much better than them. And the issue is they can't get out of their own way in not only losing to Texas, but also losing to the brands that aren't supposed to be as big. And then it's this overzealous nature that Texas A&M as a university has put on to try to come against Texas and overtake them. Heck, saw Varsity's horns off. Their entire fight song is just a diss track about another university. It's not even a fight song. It's a rap battle more than anything. And that mentality for decades on end is why they haven't won a national championship in a major sport since 1939, since World War II, because they're just chasing a university they can never overtake. And instead of making the main thing, which is winning at a high level, it's just, we need to make this next move that's going to get us more money to overtake UT. Make this next move that separates us even more from Baylor and Texas Tech and Houston. And then the second they do that, they still can't make the main thing, which is winning. They have to make it this comparison game about, are they watching us? Do they see us? Do they see how good we are? Do they see that we went to the SEC, which is way better and bigger than the Big 12? And then when you become overzealous, when you're the Utah who walks into the Big 12 conference and says you're going to run the place and you don't, things tend to go poorly year in and year out. That's where Texas A&M sits right now. And I know this is almost antithetical to the Big 12's point. I'm making the case here A&M would be better suited in the Big 12 because they'd have a better shot at winning. That might sound like the Big 12 is worse than the SEC. Guess what? Yeah, man. In football, you can't argue it. The Big 12, by and large, isn't as good as the SEC. That's kind of obvious at this point. So it just gives Texas A&M a better opportunity to win. Would they win? They didn't do it at a high rate. Their last game of Big 12 play, they lost 77-0. Like they really weren't dominating the Big 12 as it is. At least they just have a fighter's chance to go 9-3 every year instead of going 6-6, 7-5, fire the coach. 4-8, 7-5, fire the coach. That's a rotation you don't want to be in. It's what Texas A&M has built, and leaving the Big 12 is what got them there. So yeah, your fan experience would be way cooler if you wanted the conference that you were ready to go to and could compete in, but you couldn't. You haven't been able to, and things have been miserable now. You bit off more than you could chew. Colorado did the same thing. They limped back. At some point, Texas A&M is going to look in the mirror and say, we probably should have just known the grass isn't always greener.
Yeah, they have certainly gone from, and not that they were a major competitor in the Big 12 when they were there, right? Because they were in that Texas, Oklahoma shadow. But you just think about where they'd be right now in that league, right? And if you could, now would they get the same talent that they have right now in College Station if they were in the Big 12? Maybe not, right? Like maybe you'd lose some of that talent that just wants to play in the SEC. But now the SEC has added powers like Texas and Oklahoma obviously has not done great there in year one. But there's some promise with that defense that they've got. There's some promise with pulling in what I think is the best quarterback and the best. Big 12 fans won't want to hear me rave about these two teams. But I think Oklahoma has pulled in maybe the best quarterback and running back duo out of the portal. And if they pair that with another top 10 defense, I think they're going to be a competitor there to go 8-4, 9-3-ish. And you look at the tiers of the SEC. Every conference has their tiers. A&M is probably in the second to last tier, in my opinion, right? I think they're above the Mississippi States, the Kentuckys, the Vandys, although obviously Pavia had a nice year last year. I think they're above that tier. But I don't think they're in the same realm, even though they beat them head to head. I don't think they're in the same realm as even LSU. They're maybe right there around South Carolina, somewhere. I mean, look at performance. They're probably either in the same or a tick tier below Missouri over the last 5 years or so. Easily. And so I just, and that's football only, right? Basketball, you could have some arguments about, they've had some good baseball seasons and things, but football only, man, like I think it's tough to really not regret them jumping. And I just don't see a path for them to break into. Could they break into that second tier? Could they break into where they're in the Missouri or the LSU tier? Maybe, but I can't see them ever jumping over some of the other teams in that conference. And then God forbid, the SEC add in a Florida State or a Clemson, then you're just jumping down even further. And it makes it even tougher on A&M. And again, I don't know if any A&M fans would sit here and say, I regret being in the SEC. I think they have too much pride to do that. Florida State could go to the SEC and go 6-6 for the next 10 years. And I don't think that their fans would ever be humble enough to say that. That's a tough thing to admit. But I think in their heart of hearts, they potentially know that's not a great spot for them to be.
Well, if you're an A&M fan and you want to push back on any of this, I'll ask you the final question. Would you rather be 8-4 in the SEC and playing in the Liberty Bowl, or 11-1 in the Big 12 playing in the college football playoff? That's all.
Yeah, pretty straightforward on that one.